Welcome to Wine, Women, and Writing. You found me, Pamela Fagan Hutchins, and my guest for today, who I'll introduce in a moment. And we are going to talk about women's writing and great female characters, authentic, complex female characters, and with a little luck, their origins, the real life stories they're based upon, their inspirations, and all that kind of good stuff. We do it with a little bit of a reference, some humor. Whatever comes out or happens, and we are happy about it. And as I said, I'm Pamela, and I write the USA Today best-selling and Silver Falchion winning mysteries that are part of the What Doesn't Kill You series. You can learn more about them on my website, PamelaFaganHutchins.com. The newest release are my Maggie books. They're irreverent and fun, Livewire, Sick Puppy, Dead Pile. I'd love it if you check them out. You can also find out about past episodes of Wine, Women, and Writing there, as well as my upcoming guests. And what's cool about that is you can see the books that I'm reading and be reading along with me, so that when we get to these shows, we're book clubbing together, because that's what's really makes this fun. And if you enjoy this completely free to use show focusing on promoting female authors and you'd like them to continue, I'd ask that you consider supporting it. And it's easy to do at bit.ly, bit.ly/WWW with Pamela. No contribution is too small. And if you do contribute, I'll mention you on the air. So the thanks this week goes to Susie and Peter. Thank you guys. Appreciate you supporting women in the arts. And as far as the ongoing saga of where the heck is Pamela, or Waldo, in my summer of ever-changing locations, I'm back at my parents' little ranch in the tiny town of De Leon, Texas, and we're going to battle the country internet here with my guest who has big city internet, and so I'm sure if there's any problems, it's going to be mine. I'm very excited about our guest today, and not just because I enjoy her books, but also because I know her from back when. And the author in question is International Book Award winner Lilas Taha, here to talk about Lost in Time. Hello, how are you?
Hi, it's so good to see you again.
It's so good to see you too. As I was thinking about this morning about the chance to talk to you, I was trying to remember how long ago I first met you, or where I first met you. And I was kind of drawing a blank for that first special moment, but it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. I do remember, actually. I remember the first time I met you. I think it was 2012. It was in a writers' conference. And I think I was so frustrated. I was talking to a friend, Roger, if you recall. And
yes.
Standing right next to him, and you chipped in a couple of very sound advice, and that's how we connected.
So basically, I was bossy and nosy, just like always.
A boost.
I remember that. Now that you say that, I remember that exact moment, and the hotel the conference was in and everything. And yes. I had been hearing about you, believe it or not. Actually, it's very believable that I've been hearing about you for a while, because people in the Houston writers community were talking about your great writing. And it was before you'd ever published anything. So It was kind of a secret. There's this woman, and she's really, really amazing. So it's great to now, well, 7 years later, be here talking about your books.
Yeah, 3 books later, too.
3 books later. And you told me earlier, 3 books later, but multiple books in the works right now. So
yes,
go.
Yeah, I'm working on a sequel to Lost in Time, and I'm finalizing a book that's totally different. It's not connected to the stories, and it's in its final stages. Yeah.
Excellent. And do you do your writing in that super cool library that you're in right now? I mean, look at her, look behind her. It's like thousands of books.
That's true. Yeah, I do part of my writing here, but most of the creative part, I do it on my iPad anywhere I want, mostly on the kitchen table, actually, or on the couch. But I do come in here to finalize things. And
so you can type on your iPad. That's impressive.
Yeah, all the time. It took over the laptop and everything. It just has everything for me.
I think I'm going to have to try the iPad. Well, anyway, a discussion for another day, technology. So with your books, the first one that I read was not Lost in Time. I read Shadows of from Damascus years ago and really loved it. So
book, Shadows of Damascus. Yeah.
yeah. And so with your books, for the readers that did not follow instructions, or the listeners that did not follow instructions and read ahead of time so that they can be ready for the discussion, tell them a little bit about Lost in Time. Give them a teaser.
Okay. It is a story that explores the idea of identity, cultural identity. So it follows the lives of Petra, the main female character, and Sami, the main male character, who are both first generation Palestinian Americans. And they go through their lives in Houston, mostly, trying to connect with their roots and solve a mystery that popped up into their lives and the way their relationship develops. So that's the core of the book.
And when we think about where good books come from, and we think about where writers get their inspiration, how much of your life and your experiences do you pull into putting together your books?
Oh, a lot of it, a lot of it. I know everybody says that writers write what they know. But of course, writers write what they feel, what they perceive. So I have a very complex background in terms of how I ended up here. I come from a Palestinian father and a Syrian mother from Syria. And I was born in Kuwait and I grew up in Kuwait. And then when the Gulf War happened in 1990, I ended up in the States here. Strangely enough, I ended up in Wisconsin, which was so different than the desert of Kuwait. And then I married and moved to Texas. So, and I have children who are born here, and this is their home, and they've grown up here. So they are first generation Palestinian Americans. So the story connects to my children's sense of identity in a way, but in a more dramatic way, of course.
Your life could be, a movie in and of itself. There's a lot of drama back there. We won't get into all of it. Feel free to share any stories as we go along. But now I know where, with Shadows of Damascus, that Wisconsin setting came from. It's your latter part of your childhood.
That's true. So I lived in Wisconsin for 2 years. Yeah, a lot of it is pulled from that experience.
And now we have Houston coming into play as one of the, one of the three primary settings, at least, of not your newest book, but Lost in Time. So with the characters, you mentioned that a lot of this is from how you feel about your kids as first generation Americans. Were any of the characters in the book drawn from real life? Are they completely figments of your imagination?
Figments, completely fictional. Yeah, they're not based on anyone specific in my life. They're older than my children. Yeah, this is how I write. I want to write a story about a specific character. So I create the character and I make it real in my head as much as possible. And I think that's what most writers do.
Right.
And then I put them together on the pages, the characters, and they take over. So I live in this world with them around me and talking to each other and what have you. And that's how the story develops. So I don't have a story complete from A to Z, from chapter 1 to chapter 30 of what the plot is like, but I have these characters that I want them to interact and I want them to explore, and that's how I write. That's how I wrote Lost in Time.
So you just start writing and let the characters develop their own lives and relationships. There's not any outlining, any beats, or you just let it rip.
Absolutely. I know it's the least effective way of writing, because it's very time consuming. and it's not organized. But that's how I write. I just start with chapter 1 and keep writing. And of course, but by then I've had the research done. I've done all the necessary things to learn about my characters, about their environment, about the history of the area, everything. And then I start writing. But I don't put things down. That's my problem. And younger, we keep forgetting things. So every now and then I would, go back and, oh, did I put this in chapter 1? It's really time consuming, but that's the way I write. That's how.
So not even any yellow stickies or emails to yourself. You just let it flow. That is brave, and it is very lifelike, because that's how we live our lives, right? There is no outline going forward. You just kind of step off into the unknown, and you're doing that with your characters, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's time consuming. I've done some that way too. And you end up with something beautiful, and it nearly kills you in the process.
Exactly. And surprising at the same time. I would sometimes sit down to write a certain chapter knowing that, okay, maybe I'll take it in this direction. But then when the characters start talking to each other or doing something or whatever, they surprise me. They take me in a totally different direction. So it's fun. It's fun. I have to say, I'm originally an engineer. I'm an electrical engineer, and I have a master's in human factors engineering, which is part of industrial engineering. So I'm so used to technical writing and being so organized and focused and all that. But then when I switched to creative writing, it's a totally different field, completely different monster. There's, I let go, basically. I completely let go.
I love that. My husband's an engineer, and he tries to help me with the writing, and he's gotten where he really loves brainstorming, because there's not, the walls around you between the formulas going from one place to another. And I can totally see how that would be really nurturing the other side of your brain, to be able to be someone who's smart enough to be an engineer and creative enough to be a writer. So you're becoming my hero all over again. Now, okay, so with your plot, we've got our wonderful setting, or multiple settings in this book, because it spans Houston and the Middle East. It's very multicultural. It is exotic, was one of the things I felt as I was reading it. Was, here I am living, literally I'm in a little bitty town in a farming community in Texas, and I'm getting to experience places that I've never been, and smells and foods and sights that I've never seen. So for me, it was like traveling to really exotic locations. But it's also a very romantic book. It's partly a suspenseful book with a mystery that the characters are solving, and it's partly a romance.
That's true.
What is it to you when you were writing it, or when you were done? What did you think that you had delivered?
I had a very strong romantic relationship between the characters, but I would characterize it in general as a human interaction kind of story with romantic elements, with
Right.
history, with some culture, and some perspective from my point of view. So, but mainly, yeah, you're right, it's a relationship between two people that I want them to get together, but so many things get in the way. I'm not going to give away
so many things, big and small. But it is, and when I think about what women like to read, what people like to read, and I had this conversation with a thriller writer recently about action thriller. Very of our lives really like that. Most of our lives have people in them. They have romantic interests, they have children, they have friends, they have parents. And that's what gets me in your book, is those multi-generational relationships, and all the people that Petra cared so much about in this book. So that's, to me, it was the drama, it was the family, it was the relationships that really kept me glued to the page.
Wonderful. That's so good to know.
And as far as plot, so you said you're a pantser, you're totally pantsing this whole way. It's completely character driven for you. You never thought, this is kind of where I see this going. Ultimately, plot wise, I'm picturing this. That just doesn't happen for you.
It happens way late in the book. After I've passed the half point.
Yeah.
After I've passed the peak in the plot, that's when I start thinking, okay, how should this develop? Maybe it should go in this direction. But then thankfully I have my husband first and other people that I talk to who are exposed to it, as specifically my husband, as the story is developing, because I read out loud to him and what have you, and getting the perspective from someone else outside my little world bubble. It's so helpful. It makes me see things in a different view, and sometimes it takes me in a different direction as well. So I would say it's an interactive process as I'm writing the book, it gets me very involved and into it, and then reaching that end point is not that important for me as I'm writing the book.
It's interesting that you talk about collaborating with your husband. For me, especially, because I really collaborate with my husband. I think everybody needs someone when they're writing to interact with, to bring a book to its full potential. I am never pleasantly surprised how much my books lack until I start getting that feedback. And I'm like you, I do it partway through. And my husband is my first reader and my brainstorming partner, and he'll bring things up and I'm thinking, why didn't I think of that? That's a great idea. I must be a terrible writer because that never occurred to me. But it's amazing. And every new reader you bring in has that perspective. I think too, that's one of the cool things about the reader-author, relationship. The reader doesn't know that it's a mutual relationship. You're writing for them. You're hoping for their thoughts and things like that. But each person brings their own ideas to the table when they're reading a book.
Absolutely.
You mentioned book club earlier, and I wondered about whether you've had the opportunity to meet with book clubs about this book. I would think there'd be some wonderful discussions.
I have, yeah. Just last week, I had a wonderful group of ladies who, in a book club, who discussed, read Lost in Time and discussed it. They had already read my second book, Bitter Almonds, and invited me over, and that was a wonderful discussion. And then, like 2 months later, they invited me over for Lost in Time, and now they're reading. I think in November, I think they're reading Shadows of Damascus. So they're just grabbing the books and going through them, which is absolutely thrilling. I mean, you want readers to be involved and to actually demand. Since I'm working on the sequel for Lost in Time, it was so important to get their feedback and other readers' feedback on Amazon reviews, whatever, and Facebook, because since I'm working on the sequel, there are so many ideas I could use and utilize and shift directions and what have you. So feedback is so important.
It is. And it's so exciting when you get these invitations to book club and things like that. And it's crazy because readers will say, would you mind, or would you consider? And it's like, for an author, you're like, well, I would move heaven and earth to come to your book club. This is absolutely the thing I write for.
Absolutely. And it opens your eyes to so many things that I personally didn't even think that were induced in the book or hidden in the book. I just write a story, but people, according to their own experiences and the way they read things in between the lines that I didn't even think about. And it's so wonderful to learn for a writer.
It really is. And so you guys, Lilas is available to book club.
Yes.
And she knows how to Zoom now. So you could even do it by Zoom from a distance. I've had some where I've done them by Zoom. So now when you're writing, I already know the answer to this question. I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you write thematically, or does that sneak up on you later? Or do you ever consider theme at all? So Lost in Time, as an example, do you feel that there is a theme that emerged from the book? And if so, was it intentional, or was it just what the characters had to say?
I think there is a theme, yes, to answer your question. And the theme, I think, in general, is identity. How we define identity, or how the characters define their cultural or background identity. I think I had that in the back of my mind all along when I was writing the story, but the way it came up was surprising to me because of the way characters interacted and all the events that happened in the story. So it wasn't surprising to say that this is a book about self-identity and cultural identity. It's a book about two people who happen to have a problem with their identity. So,
right.
Yeah.
And with the title, by the way, for those of you that haven't seen the cover of the book yet, it's Lost in THYME time, not TIME time. This is not a time traveling book. So where did the title come from?
Yeah. Well, thyme, the herb, THYME, is a very specific food staple for Palestinian cuisine. And, it's in there's a specific meal dish that only utilizes that herb. So it's very specific to the culture. But then in the book, the character Petra uses, should I give it away or should I not?
Minor spoiler, turn your sound down if you don't want to hear it. If you do want to hear it, that's okay. It doesn't give away the whole plot. So okay.
Something that she uses reminds the main character, Sammy, of that smell, of that essence. So that's where the word comes from. And then lost in, because both characters are lost in this world, trying to figure out a way either to each other or way back to the past, to their roots. So how the title came up. I came up with it.
I love the title, actually. I loved the title. And when I got to that part of the book where I was starting to see where the title came from, I was like, yay, this is so cool.
I put the title way after I'm done writing.
Yeah?
Like that. Yeah. Because I don't know exactly what the story is as I'm writing it.
Right.
So every book I've written, after I'm done, the title, comes out.
So another, besides from knowing you and knowing your background, really relating to the fact that you were able to pull from your own experiences so authentically in creating the setting and the characters and their world in this book. The other thing that strikes me as a repeated, I don't want to say theme, but issue in your books is your concern for victims of domestic violence and abuse. It very much came out in Shadows of Damascus, but it came out in this one as well with, I don't want to do a spoiler here either, but there is an unlikely person who's not very nice, who does bad things to other people in the home. And so tell us a little bit about your background helping victims of domestic abuse.
I worked with a nonprofit organization for about for quite some time, for about 12 years, helping victims of domestic abuse. And my focus was direct contact with the victim, being an advocate for the survival, and taking her or him from the point of zero hope to an independent stage where they're completely independent from the abuser, safe, and there's prospects for a better life. And even we prosecuted we went after some abusers. So in that line, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself, about how to see people, about the amount of pain and suffering that survivors go through, and how much is so unknown, misunderstood about people who go through this horror, being abused by the people who are supposed to be loving them and protecting them. So it's a very dear cause to my heart, just from my exposure to, in the field, to these kind of victims, and the hoops that we had to run through to get them relief or get them help or, set them on a better path. And of course, there are a lot of disappointments on the way after working for 2 years with a victim and getting her to a point where she can be, completely independent. And then some of them go back to the same abuser. Some of them fall in a different relationship with another abuser, because it's all, encompassing, that kind of problem. It touches everyone, every sector of society. It doesn't matter, if you're educated, uneducated, it doesn't matter. It's just a huge, tremendous problem. It's a disease. So I worked and up to a point where when I first started writing Shadows of Damascus, my first book.
Right.
11. That's when events started happening. So I emotionally couldn't, be as effective as I used to be. So I decided to stop and, finalized all my cases and started writing out of frustration.
Right.
That's how I started writing. That's how I switched to this field. At the time, I was implementing my background in terms of human factors engineering in running the organization. But anyway, that's why it's so important for me. That's why I tried to put it somehow, some way, in some books to show the long-term effect of this problem. It's not just, it happened and people move on. No, it stays with you. It stays with the children. And it's a very devastating problem that continues on and on.
It was very, very obvious from the first page, the first chapter, that someone in the book was struggling with something in their past that had had a very big impact on them. And I don't think it's a spoiler to talk about who, since the first chapter is Sammy. Yes. And that you have a big, strong, successful man who is absolutely crippled by his past. And it was really powerful. And to see the effect it was having on his current relationships, his fears about the future, and then the impact it has on the next generation as well. So it was really seamlessly woven into the book, and it was so much a part of who he is that I really loved that. And I apologize, Petey the Boston Terrier has barked. He snores, he barks. Come on up, Petey, say hello. Come on up. You're just going to have to say hi to everybody since you're here. Oh, wow. This would be Petey, who just barked and interrupted the podcast. See his eye? He's my zombie boy. Or Marty Feldman. I can never decide who. He had an eye knocked out when he was little. He's probably going to go right back to the door and bark, and we're just going to ignore him. So either that, or he's very concerned about Sammy in the plot line and Sammy's fate, because that's when he had to speak up, right? Well, it is, it's such also an issue that affects so many more people than we realize, because it's a hidden hurt for so many of us. And it's the case with Sammy as well. He doesn't talk about what's giving him these problems. He'd rather people think that he had problems than tell them why he has this particular issue. So it really is, it's wonderful that you include it, not just because it made for a good story, but it's wonderful that you include it because it's such an authentic part of way too many people's lives.
Yeah. I believe that, I read books to enjoy and enter a different world and all that. But at the same time, it's important to learn something.
Right.
Spending all that time on a book other than just enjoying it. That's my belief. So I just wanted to, for the readers who, God forbid that they're going through something similar or something touching their lives in a negative way, to learn something from the book as well. Yeah.
And as much as I do the same, I read to enjoy and to escape, but there's nothing more wooden than a world where we only present one side of a character, just the part that they present on the outside, right? It's like meeting a fake person in real life, somebody that hides everything about themselves and just puts on their Facebook face, what they're showing to the world. So when I read a character that has depth and complexity, they feel more authentic to me. And it doesn't mean that just because bad things are happening to them that the book is depressing. It's now I can relate. Now I have something where I can empathize with this character. And Sammy, being so strong, so successful, so good looking, you know, he had a lot of things going for him, is someone you can empathize with because he hurts, just like all of us. So I loved it. I loved that element of it. And of course, Petra is going through all of her challenges as well. We don't mean to minimize Petra, but we got on the subject of domestic abuse.
Yes, she's dealing with so many issues in her life, so many problems and a lot of insecurities. And I think we all go through them, no matter how strong a woman is. There are periods in our lives where we're not really that strong. We don't want to be strong, or we give in to weakness. And then the trick is to just get up and make the best of it.
And sometimes
that's how I designed her. You cut off. It's okay. Go ahead.
Oh, we had one of those sunspots where we had a delay. So one of the strengths of Petra, of course, is that after falling apart, you pick yourself back up. You get over how you feel about having let yourself down. But I think too, there's some strength sometimes in saying, I don't care what anybody else's expectations are. I've got to take a break. I've got to go have a meltdown and recharge, because I'm not Superwoman. I'm strong and I'm coming back, but everybody needs to recharge their battery. And she, you know, she bounced back well. I really enjoyed her. Now, with your family, I follow Lilas on Facebook, and I've got to say, this family is all over the world. You guys travel a ton.
Yeah, we love to travel.
I want to be part of your family. You go everywhere. and you know, again, art imitating life. It's multi-generational pictures. I'll see pictures of you with your parents, with your husband, with your kids, and all enjoying life together. And it's really wonderful.
Yes, yes. I've been very, very blessed. And you know, like, again, going through my life up to this point, yeah, I've had, you know, I've survived different wars and been, you know, displaced a number of times and what have you, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Sounds a little bit like Lost in Time. But it's true. You know, if you measure a life by the challenges, you're missing out on all of the joy of the relationships. It gets back to what we were talking about with what makes great fiction. It's the relationships in a life. It's the love that we share. It's not necessarily the hardships that we look back on and say, that's my life. They may have shaped us. They may have put us in a certain place, but it's the love.
Yeah. Focus on the good. Focus on the good. That's how I think, that's how you move forward. That's what I believe.
And me as well. And for those of you out there, if you would like to belatedly, because I asked you to do this before, grab your copy of Lost in Time and delve into the worlds of Sammy and Petra and their struggles as they search for cultural identity in midst of many challenges, and hopefully find love. Cross our fingers. You need to go ahead and get it, and you need to read it, because there's a sequel coming, and we've got to be ready for that, right? So this week, go out and grab yourself a copy of that. While you're doing it, next week's guest is going to be Patty Callahan Henry and the Favorite Daughter. So here's your reminder to read ahead there as well. And that if you are looking for then another read, go ahead and start with My Saving Grace and make it through number 15, Dead Pile, and I will think that you're a superstar. And last but not least, if you enjoy shows about female writers and the authentic, complex female characters that they create, then you are getting them completely free of charge, hopefully in the format that you would into your podcast, your RSS device, and let the podcast free anytime, anywhere, delivered automatically. You can come look at these videos on Facebook or YouTube. But if you want them to continue, consider a donation at www.bit.ly/www with Pamela, Wine, Women, and Writing with Pamela. And we'll keep these shows coming to you. Lilas, It's been great to see you again. I'm just all giddy and happy.
It's so lovely seeing you and connecting with you again.
And I will really look forward to the sequel to Lost in Time. For those of you out there, have a great week, read a great book, and check in with me next week. Bye, everyone.